So,
fairy lights. No, we're talking about cholesterol.
okay, so I started doing the potato method in January. It's now October, so I've been doing it about 10 months, and I've made steady progress. In November, before I started, I had a blood test to see what my cholesterol level would be like. Historically, it's always been high and higher than the acceptable amount you're meant to have. You're meant to have 5.2 by one measure that they do, and mine's been a lot higher. And in November, it was 6.3. Since then, I started doing potato, and I had it measured again in June. And the measures that they gave me in June were, instead of 6.3, it's gone down to 4.7. So that's a 25% drop. And the other measurements which are important for people who know about these sorts of things is my triglycerides level was 1.23. My serum HDL was 1.47. Serum LDL was 2.7. And serum cholesterol stroke HDL ratio was 3.2, a non-HDL cholesterol level was 3.2. They're very good results. The only one that I really understand is the 4.7, which is a funny one to record, but it's gone down 25%. So basically, in the past, I was somebody that needed to perhaps take drugs. I needed to take what they give you to lower your cholesterol artificially. But now that's just not a problem. And this is something that's probably been affecting me for years and years. I've had high cholesterol, and now it's dropped to an acceptable level. And I think it probably would have dropped even further now, because that was June, and I've certainly progressed further in terms of my potato work. So it's great results.
Very good. Excellent. Generally speaking, when people start the method, when people get their maximum pause up to 80 seconds, the blood becomes a lot thinner. And it's no longer thickened by the cholesterol. So cholesterol is actually a form of mucus, which is one of the body's defensive mechanisms to slow the blood flow down so that you don't lose so much CO2. It's a way of slowing up the loss of CO2. So as soon as you get your maximum pause up to 80 seconds, 80 steps, the blood becomes a lot thinner and the cholesterol level starts to reduce, but it's no longer a problem because your blood is a lot thinner. Because you've got more CO2 from your practice. You're not deficient anymore, so that defensive mechanism isn't needed. That's how it works.
Right.
That's the explanation we give.
Also, my weight has dropped. I've lost between 2 and 3 stone, and that's without really trying, without really doing anything. The method, automatically, I don't need to eat that much. So I eat as much as I want, but I'm just not eating that much. My eating patterns have changed. Now I'm not carrying around, an extra 2 to 3 stone that I was in the past, which is fantastic. I wouldn't have done that without the potato method. Other types of diet in the past, I've tried to cut down or to have certain sort of foods in terms of cholesterol. None of it worked. None of it would do anything. It just didn't really have any effect. My eating now is not something I'm thinking about. It's not the main thing that I'm doing. The main thing I'm doing is I'm doing this breathing method. But as a consequence of that, and it all comes from the breathing method, because as a consequence of that, my eating is different. I'm eating what I want and when I want, and I'm not as much overeating.
It makes a huge difference getting that 2 or 3 stone off, doesn't it?
I think so, but there's a problem in terms of the fact of other people's perception, which I'm not really worried about. It doesn't bother me at all, but I look thin to people, and people don't like that. There's I think a prejudice that people have against men who look thin. Women can look very thin, and it's very, people like that. If men look thin, it's unusual. Generally, most men, if you walk around in sort of like, Western society, they look bloated. Just 90% of people look bloated. And so if you don't look like that, you stand out. It's strange. Whereas I think I've got the amount of fat that I should have for my body. It feels right, and it is right. And so now I'm able to exercise, run for an hour, and be quite happy with that, quite fit with that. So I'm healthy, but I don't think it looks like that from the outside because of people's prejudice.
The thing is, there's one thing is the perception or the general meme of the time. And then there's what's actually going on with the physiology. And what's happening with the physiology when you get your level of CO2 up is the muscle tone is much better. It's stronger and more rubbery. So we call that muscle tonus. The tonus of all tissue improves. So you may actually put on weight, but it'll be because you've got more muscle in the body, and muscle is more dense. So per cubic centimetre, or whatever cubic measurement you use, it's going to be heavier than fat. So you may actually be a bit heavier than you thought you were if you measure. But people's perceptions, they don't really know what physiology is. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand how the body works. Nobody does actually, but what we do know with the method is that if you get your control pores up, the first thing that happens when people are bloated is the water starts to come off, because most people have water retention. But water retention comes off, so you lose weight because you lose water. And then once the toxins start to discharge, then the fat cells sort of fall away. Now, it isn't always the case that people lose weight immediately. If the method thinks that there's more important jobs to do first, they'll do that job first before the weight comes off. Because the body has to be able to cope with the discharge of the toxins first. And once the toxins are discharged, then the fat cells can fall away. Because the job of the fat cells is to hide the toxicity. That's a defensive mechanism. Not everybody has that defensive mechanism. If you do have a tendency to put on weight, it's an advantage, particularly when you have a toxic body, because those fat cells store the toxins. For those people who don't have that as a defensive mechanism, and they tend to be thin and wiry, the toxins get stored in the tissue. And that's worse.
Because the cleansing will be worse.
The cleansing is worse, yeah, and the damage to the tissue is worse, because the fat cells actually hide the toxins and keep them away from the tissue. We don't call this a treatment for weight loss because it's unpredictable. We never know when the weight's going to come off. And when the weight does come off, then it can be quite unpleasant.
Why is it unpleasant?
Well, because some people who have had a lot of weight on them for a long time get very sick whilst the toxins are discharging.
A lot of cleansing.
Yeah.